on page number 1. We'll start from the Tur, and we'll go through a number of the texts here where we'll see where Melachatchila it was enacted taka, that they should go, and that later it was decided that they should no longer go because of a concern of Michel. We were concerned that the Chumrah of being Machmer on Tala or Tshuva in the lead up to Yom Kippur will lead to a Kula in another area. So let's start with the Tur. In theory, only part of it is really relevant, but at the end of the day, it gets you into the field of Yom Kippur anyway. So let's read it together. This is source number 1 on page number 1. Tur Erechaim Tofrei Sholisim Tofrei Shvav, where we discusses the halachas, part of the halachas of Yom Kippur. Every single person should put to his hand in Yom Kippur to appease anybody who offended him or had in any way had wronged him. When it comes to Averis between a person and the Eibishter, Yom Kippur will be mechaber by itself. But an Aveda, which is between a person and his friend, Yom Kippur will not be mechaber until the person is appeased. The person who was wronged is appeased. Even if you only offended him with words, you have to appease him. You have to go to him. If he's not appeased once, you go a second time and a third time. And if he's passed away, you take a minion to his kever. All of the standard things that we know when it comes to appeasing a person who one may have wronged. Now, I want to jump down a little bit. Kedei. A few lines later, in the middle of one Kedei. Kedei. Why is it? What is the purpose of this Kedei? We want the hearts of all Yidden to be complete, one with his friend. There should be no room for a Satan to prosecute Alehem. So it says in Pirkei Rabbi Re'ei Ra'as Mo. When Small saw that there was no Aveda in Yom Kippur, he said, Master of the universe, you have one nation in the world, just like the Malachim. Just like the Malachim go around barefoot, Yisrael, Yidden also, we've taken off our leather shoes, we're walking around barefoot just like the Malachim. They can't jump. We're not going to go into that right now. And they stand in the feet on the feet of Yom Kippur. Just like the Malachi Asharis are clean of all sin, so too Kach Yisrael and the Kiyim Mikol the Yidden are also clean from all sin. And then we continue discussing this idea of the Shalom, that there should be Shalom between Yidden. But a line later, just after the 2 dots, you'll see V'nagul Litzvel be'erev Yom Kippurim. There was a minhag to Tovel on Erev Yom Kippur. V'amar Rav Amram Tovel D'Mashal. It should be dafka in the 7th hour. Or Mispar Mincha. V'amar Rav Sadia. Whole discussion exactly when it should be. No worries. Let's leave this here. So we see that there is an idea, firstly, of going to the mikveh. I want you to read the very last line. But nowadays, this is the third last line. The just at the end of the line. Nowadays, we don't have the same purity. The kiman she'en bali kroyin toivin kolashan, and since people who have emitted seed don't usually go to the mikveh kolashana, there is no chayva. There's no obligation to do this tefillah. Never one should make a bracha. But nevertheless, the world, the people, the Yidden, were noyig to go to the mikveh, nevertheless, to retire themselves in the Yom Kippur, and they're relied upon this same measure. So, they want to be clean like the Malachi Asharis on Yom Kippur. So here we have the initial discussion of tefillah, the idea, the introduction of tefillah. Once upon a time, it was much more relevant because people were noyig always to go to the mikveh when they were bali kroyin. Now that people don't observe this in the same way, so it doesn't have the same tkiflas, the same strength. Let's go to the Shulchan Aruch, to the Machaber, where he brings this in as well. Says the Machaber, this is Simon Tafrei Shvav in a Seif Dalin. One can go to the mikveh and he can get malchus whenever he wants. It should be before the night comes, before night falls. You should make a bracha on the tefillah. Okay, now this gets into an interesting discussion as to what exactly is the purpose behind this tefillah. What's the motivation? Is it for tara or for tshuva? We're going to see a little bit more about this in this day. Now, just as a heads up, the printing somehow, some of the sources have English and some of them don't. None of them are supposed to have English. So just jump over to page 5 on the Magen Avraham, where we'll see the first time there's a discussion of a pnuya going to the mikveh, somebody who's not married going to the mikveh. Says the Magen Avraham. Mishum keri, so people go to the mikveh on Erev Yom Kippur because of having emitted seed. When the people who would say vidui, this is referred to as a minig shtus, a minig of folly, a folly of fize, isha to shimsha, and therefore ladies who are going to go to the mikveh within 3 days of intimacy will need to make sure that there is no zera remaining, in order that she should not admit the shekh zera after having gone to the mikveh. Okay, when some of us have learned in Hilchos Nida that specifically the 2 times that a lady can become pregnant is close to the time of her vestes or close to the time she goes to the mikveh, and therefore in those times we say definitely do not remove any of the zera that might be inside because we are hoping for a pregnancy. There's a much bigger mitzvah here of le'erev al tanach or kru revu, and therefore we say that in this instance do not make sure we don't want to remove chas v'sholem, destroy the zera ha'iloim. Now there are those who say, Shatam de tefillah mishum tshuva. The purpose, the reason for this tefillah is tshuva. Hafilu, because even na'arim or besulois, even young lads and unmarried ladies, shem b'nei mitzvahs who are over bar and bas mitzvah, tov less to go to the mikveh. Okay, and he goes on. Even somebody who toveled in Erev Rosh Hashanah, he's also going to go to the mikveh nevertheless because there's been time in the middle because of Tara, because of tshuva. Tshuva still is still in place, and therefore we still want to go to the mikveh on Erev Yom Kippur. So we see here the first mention of this idea, and he's actually bringing this from the Maharil, one of the Chachlei Ashkenaz, who's to my understanding the first that I know of, who mentions this minhag that even the Na'arim, the Basulois, will go to the mikveh on Erev Yom Kippur in order to prepare for the sake of tshuva and to cleanse themselves before Yom Tov, before Yom Kippur specifically.
That's what they did.
Sorry?
You were saying that is permitted. So.
Correct. Exactly. Now we see something very interesting, which is the Sdei Chemed, who is a famous Sfardish Apostle, who of course we know so much about, or whatever we know about, we know because the Rebbe had a special chavilas for the Sdei Chemed, and he specifically took the Sdei Chemed and he printed it with a stempel of kahos because he wanted it to be a set of kahos as part of the. In other words, despite the fact that kahos was usually dedicated solely to Chassidus or specific svarim that were put out by Lubavitch, Sdei Chemed specifically was put out by kahos as well. The Sdei Chemed picks up on the fact that the Bar Heitev usually brings every psak that the Magen Avraham brings the poil. Every Magen Avraham is, as we know, one of the primary poskim on the Shulchan Aruch. Magen Avraham is brought in the Alter Rebbe everywhere, and usually his psak is predicated upon the Magen Avraham. And similarly, the Bar Heitev would also always bring any psak that were Neig L'Poil, he'd bring the Magen Avraham. However, look in the next source, and you'll see that he makes no mention of this minhag for the pluyos to go to the mikveh. And nowadays they were noig litbel gimapamim to dip 3 times, or the hisvadis mikveh and to do vidu in the mikveh. Api kabbalah harizal based on the kabbalah of the Arizal. Gam nog and also noig shit because to us a mincha that when you go to the mikveh it should be before mincha. We Chassidim Jatovlin Lamitas Tzilis. There are some Chassidim who do 39 Tzilis. Look in the Shalah for more details. No mention of the Tzilah of the Pnuya. The question is, the Bar Heitev always brings a psak that's from the Negei L'Poil from the Magen Avraham every time. How could it be that here he doesn't bring it? So let's carry on, and we'll see that throughout the closer to more recent poskim, we see varying stances. Let's look at the Alter Rebbe, the Shulchan Aruch Harav, which is the next source. Says the Alter Rebbe, those who say that the reason for this tefillah is mishum tshuva, just like a ger who's converting, and part of the tshuva process is to go to the mikveh. There should be 3 dips in accordance with the standard protocols for a ger and for tshuva. Says the Alter Rebbe b'feirush, we are noig that they should go to the mikveh, even though keri, the idea of haitzah zera is becoming even shaykh by them. Even somebody to the mikvah Erev Rosh Hashanah and has nothing to carry since, nevertheless you should still go to the mikvah. Erev Yom Kippur mishum tshuva. So we see Befedish Alter Rebbe does bring this minhag, notwithstanding the fact that the Bar Hated left it out. The Magen Avraham mentions it, and the Alter Rebbe brings this as well. Now, we know from our minhag, we know that the Alter Rebbe Shana was written for the Welt. It wasn't written for minhag Chabad, and we know from our minhag, of course, that the Pnei Yisafka don't go to the mikvah in Erev Yom Kippur. So we're going to have to understand what happened in the interim, for which reason, notwithstanding the previous minhag as it was before. Nowadays, Pnei Yis don't go to the mikvah. So we'll get there soon. I spoke to Rabbi about it. Over here, definitely, the protocol is that the Pnei Yis will not use the mikvah on Erev Yom Kippur. Now, okay. The Mishnah Berurah says again. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Mishum keri v'lachein dai b'pa'am achas. I want to jump down. So it looks like either we have the wrong Mishnah Berurah. I believe the Mishnah Berurah says that we don't go to the mikveh. So you'll see over here, he brings Mishum Keri. I'm not going to read it inside. You'll see there's no mention of it again. So we're going backwards and forwards. First, we had the Magen Avraham who said that there is such a minhag from the Maharil. Then we had the Bar Hita who made no mention of the Magen Avraham. We're back to the Alter Rebbe and it's brought again, and the Mishnah Berurah, and there's no mention of it. The Matzi Ephraim is a very famous Pesach, recent Pesach. Rabbi Ephraim Zalman Margolius brings in his Matzi Ephraim Taka this same discussion. Where are we? There you go, the very first two lines. A person is obligated to go to the mikveh in preparation to purify himself on Erev Yom Kippur. She should be pure from Tumas Keri. The Gam L'Shem Tshuva, she's bringing both of these interests, both of these agendas, both mitzad Tshuva and mitzad Tumas Keri. We're going to go to the mikveh on Erev Yom Kippur. Therefore, even Na'arim and Basulis, where Taka, they for themselves, don't have anything of being Bali Keri, nevertheless, they're going to go to the mikveh b'din tshuva. And there's a discussion if it's okay and if it's not okay. The Ksei Amata speaks about it also. We're not going to go further over here. But we're seeing one after the next. The Ben Ish Chai is going to say that they will go to the mikveh. To go through each and every single one, maybe not. But I brought it here for reference. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch definitely says, similarly in the next page, that they will go to the mikveh. So we have this interesting backing and forthing. So on that note, I'd like to draw your attention to your other copies where we have this Dei Chemed. I'd like to read through it together. It's important for us to note that there really are two discussions here, and I'm working to get through the discussion on a Pnei going to the mikveh on Erev Yom Kippur, and then there is a much broader discussion of whether B'chlal Pnei is allowed to go to the mikveh, whether the Beis themselves are allowed to let Pnei go to the mikveh. And the importance, the relevance of this is, in certain instances where, for whatever reason, the Beis found it necessary, or a Pnei might have asked to go to the mikveh, and Yom Kippur is one example, but there are many other instances where it was necessary to consider it. Definitely, let's say when somebody is married to a goy, so it's a big question whether they can go to the mikveh, because officially, halachically, they're a Pnei, and may they go to the mikveh if they ask to go to the mikveh. And apparently, one of the hardest cases that I want to have to handle is when a lady who's about to marry a guy, and her parents, who still are connected to tradition, whatever it might be, want her to go to the mikveh. And how do you manage that? And as I understand it, usually the Rabbanim will tell her that there's a beach. Here are the instructions. If you want to go to the mikveh, you go to the mikveh, but we can't actually we can't give our shtempel, we can't give our gushpanka. And that's going to be a big discussion over here as well. Masha Tovlin, the Erev Yom Kippur. This is in Sivkot and Vav, on the Stei Chemed, Chilek Vav, on the right side, the right column. Masha Tovlin, Erev Yom Kippurim. Ish possession time. This is that we go to the mikvah on Erev Yom Kippur has two reasons. Aleph, the first is Mishum Tar Mikeri, is from Tar from Keri, and Beis is Mishum Tshuva. Because of Rav Magen Avram, the Simon Tov Reish Vav, Zivkot and Ches. So the Magen Avram says, to me, high time Tovim Gam Na'arim B'Sulois. As long as you were going to make just a carry, so it wasn't going to get to them. But as soon as we're talking about tshuva, now we talk. They should be going to the mikveh because they are also obviously chayovim in tshuva. The Chen Kosav, and similarly was written in the Shulchan Aruch Hagoyim, and in Rabbi Shneur Zalman. So did Alter Rebbe in his Shulchan Aruch Sif Yud Beis, over Mateh Ephraim Sif Ches, over Kitzur Shulchan Aruch Lagoyim, and in Rabbi Reb Gansfried. The Gam Na'arim B'Sulois Yeshlam Mitpur, and also Na'arim B'Sulois are going to go to the mikveh. Oktzas Tema Alabar Hativ asks the Seichem the question that we asked before. It's a shikul wonder on the Bar Hativ. Ashadarke Bakedesh Sadik Osok Divrei Magen Avram. His way is always to quote the Magen Avram whenever it's negeh. Ubazeb here Kol Shmita. Here he was shomait, he abstained. Kenyain Sham Shuris, and I saw further Diafa. However, says the Seichem, and I decided that he did good. He made the right decision by choosing not to print, not to publish, or not to give his haskama to this din. Why? Which is in accordance with what the Rivash writes at the end of Siman Tov Chafei. Even though in the earlier generations they would allow the Ktanis to go to the mikveh. Of course, that was also negeh for taris. If a Ketana is to eat taris, she has to be pure, and therefore the adults would send the Ketanis to the mikveh in order to be pure to eat the taris. Nevertheless, Kosovo Ramban they were about to this in the later generations. Mishum, this is the chumrah that can really lead to a kula. That through her they'll come to be making this Rabbanon. Ayin Sham. See over there, he's referencing the question. So let's have a look at the question together. If you flip over to page, I think it's 8, in our sources at the very bottom of the page. We're going to come back to the Gemara soon, but we're going to see that Taka. This is a fascinating question raised by someone to the Nivash regarding Tvilas Pnuya. Says the Rivash as follows: Sha'altu you have asked, I want to explain to you Mashakosu B'Torah. This it is in the Torah. Ve'al Isha b'nidas tumosh lo yisikra v'galas rivasa. That a man cannot near a nida. Nida is one of the aroyos, and therefore there cannot be relations. Im nemra kol mishnida isha nida b'miishta b'mipnuya. Is this said regarding any nida, including even a pnuya, or is it just said regarding his wife? It says ve'al Isha b'nidas tumosa. If so. How could it be that neither the Rashba nor the Ravid make any mention of the fact that being together with the Nida? Of course, we're not talking about. We're talking about being together with the Nida, and we're saying that the same way there is a din that the Nida cannot be that when a wife is the Nida, the husband and wife cannot be together. The same is true with regards to a Pnuya when she's a Nida. So how can it be that the Rashba and the Ravid make no mention of this Isur to be together with a Pnuya who is an Nida? They always speak about an Ishtoi, the wife of a person. How could it be that in the jargon, apparently in those days, they'd refer to a Pnuya as Muteres, as available for I guess for marriage. The Chazal. How could they leave any Kadesha in the world? A Kadesha, a person who is set aside for his nus, is not going to the mikveh. Now, if it's taka an isur to be together with a pnuya when she's a nida, so then every zayna should have been allowed to go to the mikveh. Otherwise, you're being machshel the rabbin. Because now there is a mechshel. If somebody will be together with this zayna, Rachman al-Atzlan, it's going to result in a mixture for the rabbin. Instead of being an isur, it's going to be a chiyuv kares. How could it be that they do not make any takana or shum geder shatara or any boundaries of tara b'pnuya with an unmarried lady? You catch the barabim in order that there should be no mixture.
Why is the question?
Sorry?
Why would there be a habit in
Bechal between one and what? Sorry.
Why would you think it's only after Isha? Isha Nesua and the Pnuya? Why Why would you think that?
Why would you think that it's dafka mention? Because that's what it says. Everywhere, apparently, they speak about it as a tahira, as they refer to her as a muteres. And there was never an enactment made to make a syog around, somebody who is, for example, the Kadesha or the Zoina. There was never a syog made over there. There's no mention anywhere. L'chayr only speaks about Ishtay Nida. So how could it be? And that's why he's arguing that perhaps the fact that there was never a syog, there was never a fence made there, was dafka for the sake of, because there was like no problem with it.
So that's the shot Isha B'nidas to also.
It's just his wife.
Just Isha.
That's what this shoyel is asking. If taka pnuya, we just turned the page on page 9. If taka pnuya, if a person is together with her, which is a nida, is onush kares, how could it be that we allow this? So now his issue is that if taka it's true, if my assumption is right, the Rambam says whether she's his wife, whether she's a pnuya, she's always going to be asura. So we're not going to go through the answer right now, but this question is much broader than the context we've brought it in. The Rivash has speaks not great length, but it's a beautiful tshuva where he goes through the entire sugya and he brings up this very discussion of going to the Mikvah Erev Yom Kippur. You know what? Let's read the answer of the Rivash, the following part of the tshuva. I didn't print out the whole thing, just the final 2 paragraphs. Chelik me'at tshuva, this is on page 9. Sister, you're wondering, how could it be that they were not masakin? That a pnuya should go to the mikveh? You're creating a mixture for the rabbim. There's nothing to be wondering about. Since a pnuya is asura, as I explained, in the entire talik, the entire mahalach of this tshuva, the Rivash is explaining that the reason we didn't say it is because it's obvious. Of course, she's asura. Right? There's no heter l'isura regarding an ishtay. So of course, there's going to be there's a discussion of when there is a time when it's mutter to be together, and conversely, when she's an niddah, there's going to be a problem. But regarding a pnuya, there's nothing to talk about, and therefore muteres there isn't discussing her status as a niddah or not as a niddah. Muteres there is discussing her status as available to get married. Perhaps you could be medayik doing muteres loshin unbound, so to speak, untied. She's not tied to a specific person. She's available to get married. Other up the country, if she would go to the mikvah, there'll be a mixture there. Be Yisura, people will be makil in the Yisura being with her as a pruya. Yisura will only be midrabanan. As it could, tamid to that person, that tamid sheshana harbe. This is the Gemara, and I want to read it together. This is a fascinating Gemara. If you turn over to page 7, at the bottom, we're going to have the Gemara, which brings a fascinating story that's brought in the Beis Yosef in Hilchos Niddah, and discuss also. It's a source for some of the harchakas that we bring. Let's read it together. This is the Gemara in the Shabbos, Daf Gimel Amud Aleph. We learned in the yeshiva of Eliyahu. There was a story with one student. Sheshana Harbe, he learned lots of Torah. The Kara Harbe, Shana could be referring to Mishnah, and Kara refers to Psukim, the Torah. And not just that, but even the Shimush, for Shimish, Tamid Chachamim Harbe, he did Shimush by many Tamid Chachamim. He died very young. His wife would go and take his tefillin, and she take the tefillin to all the different shuls in the Beit Medrash, and she told them during the Torah that the Torah is the life and you like your days. And here, Bailey, my husband, Sheshana Harbe, he learned lots. The Kara Harbe, he read lots of Torah, the Psukim as well. He also did Shimish. How could it be that he passed away so young? How could it be? The Torah is the source for long life, for longevity, and here he passed away young. No one to answer her back. One time, said Eliyahu, Nisarachti etzla, I was a guest by her, and she was telling me over that same occurrence. Then I told her, this is a bit intense. Biti, my daughter, what was the day? What happened in your home when you were a nida? The days of your nida. Amrali, she said to me, chas v'shalom. He didn't even touch me with a small finger.